Hello, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the program. Thank you very much for your time and what a Tuesday has been. Heavy rains have adorned Accra and other parts of Ghana all day today. Of course, we are in June and tomorrow is the massive June 3rd. And when we say June 3rd and rain, you know what we are talking about. We still remember those souls that perished a few years ago. So the rain today was quite alarming, and it sent shivers down our spine when the winds was coming terribly with the rains. Altogether, there's been no reports yet of any chaos that has been occasioned by the rainfall today, and we thank God for that. Hopefully, it will continue that way, especially in these times of COVID-19. We do not want floods to also disrupt our lives. Good evening again and welcome to the show. Tonight, we're delivering to you a program in two sessions. For those of you who have seen our flyers already, you know what I'm talking about. But the first session is about religion. And on Sunday, President Akufo-Addo gave what I think is his 10th broadcast on COVID-19, and he made announcements that ease the restrictions that have been placed on Ghanaians as a result of COVID-19. However, the restrictions that he eased relating to religious gathering has generated massive controversy among the Christian community. The restrictions were eased for Christians and Muslims alike. It would appear that the Muslims are able to comply in a way that does not sufficiently disrupt their services. However, Christian groups have issued statements indicating that they are unable to open their churches according to the prescriptions that was given by the president. The big one of them is 100 people only to gather for a particular church service, and the duration of that church service ought to be 60 minutes, 1 hour. Tonight, we're taking you back to what the Archbishop said, because in our interview with the Archbishop a few weeks ago, he told us that the agitations from the church leaders and the lobbying towards the government for the reopening of the churches has nothing to do with organizing a full church service, but it had everything to do with easing those restrictions so that people can gather to pray, that it was a call to prayer. What we have done is a 12-minute montage of juxtaposing what the president said with what the Archbishop said. And the president appears 3 times and the Archbishop appears 3 times. And so we'll leave it to your judgment to listen to what the Archbishop said and listen to what the president said and see whether they are speaking on the same page or they are telling different stories. It would appear that from the desires of the Archbishop, the president may have met or should have met those desires if those were the desires of the church, according to what the Archbishop told us. Because right now, 100 people can go to the church and pray every day. They only have to pray for an hour, come back and pray for another hour. But let's refresh our minds with that one. When we come back to the studio after that, we're taking you further back. We're taking you to August 2016. And that was the day on which we were visited in this studio by an august personality. Madam Charlotte Osei, at the time the chairman of the Electoral Commission, had come up for several controversies all over the place, including the vexed issue of whether or not she was going to do a new voters register, which was the main agitation of the New Patriotic Party, then the leading opposition party in Ghana. She appeared in the studio and she answered questions about why she doesn't need to do that. But she also answered questions about the role of the Electoral Commission. We looked at the interview and thought that it's relevant for these times as the Supreme Court prepares to hear the arguments on Thursday between the National Democratic Congress, the opposition party, leading opposition party, I should say, the Office of the Attorney General, and the Electoral Commission about whether or not the Electoral Commission can conduct and compile a new voters register. And if they can do so, whether the existing voters register of 2012 should not be relevant. So we're putting this interview out just so that it refresh your memories and then link you up to what's happening on Thursday. That's Thursday morning. And Thursday evening on Good Evening Ghana, we have now settled on a documentary about the Abu Ramadan list of cases. We will show you on Thursday what the Supreme Court said. It was all about the voters register, what the Supreme Court said, what the lawyers told us the Supreme Court said, the document that they showed us, and also what the NDC lawyers think about that case and whether or not they believe, as the MPP lawyers, that the instructions of the court in Abu Ramadan has not yet been complied with. So we are linking the Charlotte Osei interview to 2 events happening on Thursday. In the morning, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments. In the evening, Good Evening Ghana is going to premiere an exclusive documentary about the voters register in the Abu Ramadan case. So without much ado, now let's get into our video session and look at the montage that we have created. The Archbishop and the President, are they on the same page? Here it is.
The brain behind the document we give to government is a proposal on how churches should operate and function in the event that churches are allowed to come back again, the protocol we should follow, and how things should be handled and everything. So for instance, if your auditorium seats 2,000 people, instead of having 2 services and having first service, 2,000 people in your first service, second service, another 2,000, reduce it at least maybe to 1,000 people or to 500 people and run many services, and then allow, say, an hour between the first and the second, between the third and the fourth services, so people can go out of the car park and then new people can come in and all that. So we gave a proposal to the government on what we think churches must do when we resume our normal services, that we can't do things like the way we used to do it before. And we propose it to the government because the government don't know how we run our services and can't tell us what we should do and what we shouldn't do, but we do know. So we sent a proposal to the government that in the event that churches are reopened, these are protocols we suggest, in line with also what the scientists have said that we should follow.
I'm now in a position to outline the roadmap for easing safely the restrictions. Ours is going to be a phased approach involving a selected list of public gatherings based on their risk profile, socioeconomic impact, and most importantly, our capacity to enforce and to respond in the event of a flare-up in our number of infections.
This thing is something that has come to stay, and I think we need to be rewired. We need mental adjustment, and we need to confront this thing with a lot of courage. Because you see, it is said that fear reacts. Fear is reaction, but courage is a decision. So we need to take a decision and confront this thing, that this thing is going to be around for a long time. And if it's going to be around for a long time, what are we going to do? Are we just going to stay in our homes, not go anywhere for the fear of dying?
We have to get a cure first before we can get back to normal.
Apart from getting the cure of dying, do you know how long it's going to take to get the cure?
But if we don't get the cure and we go out, we will contract it.
Well, listen, you know one of the things I believe? No. You can contract it even if you stay in your own house. And how long can you stay in your own house and lock yourself in? For how long? 2 years? 3 years?
No, you can't.
1 year? You know, it doesn't make sense. It's very easy for everybody to say, stay home, stay home. Fine, we are staying home. But whilst we are staying home, how do we eat? How do we take care of our families? How do we provide for our children and our loved ones?
When we go out and we get a disease, we die.
Listen, there's another dying, another death, and that is the sentence of the fear of death itself, when you are afraid of dying. So you stay home. But if you have to go out, you need to have faith. You need to have faith.
As a believer.
You need to have faith as a believer. You need to have faith that you will not die, that your assignment is not over. What I don't like is the fear we are spreading all over the place. Spread wisdom and spread hope and help people to understand why they must stay home and the physical distance, using the mask, washing hands, and all the protocol we must follow. But I don't like this thing where it's like, if you don't stay home, you will die. This thing is very dangerous. It's going to kill you. Everybody is going to die in this world. Everybody will die. It depends on what kills you and when you die.
With effect from Friday, 5th June, we will begin stage 1 of the process of easing restrictions. An abridged format for religious services can commence. 25% attendance with a maximum number of 100 congregants can worship at a time in church or at the mosque, with a mandatory 1 meter rule of social distancing between congregants. In addition to the mandatory wearing of masks for all persons at all times in churches and mosques, a register of names and contact details of all worshippers and hand-washing facilities and sanitizers must be provided, with a maximum duration of 1 hour for each service.
You are saying that you should be able to issue an email from this church.
Yeah.
That Bishop Obodai says that all leaders, 100 of them, must meet me on Mondays at the auditorium for us to pray. This is an auditorium that takes over 2,000 people.
Yeah.
the 100 should be able to come in so that we pray.
Yeah.
Currently, you cannot do that.
No.
Because of the law.
Yeah.
So you are saying, for instance, that, okay, let churches meet, but something like the Good Friday event that we missed, the Dag Heward-Moose event, cannot happen at Independence Square with 25,000. That's out.
Yeah.
It cannot happen.
We understand that.
But let people be able to gather to pray.
Yeah, people must gather to pray.
Because right now, if you gather to pray, the police will arrest you.
Yeah, it is wrong. You see,
to gather to pray
yeah,
now.
it is wrong because today, as I said, I drove throughout to Dodua, Medina, all those areas, and I was just watching and observing, and I could see that we are in trouble. And if the church doesn't pray, like James 5:13 says, that if anyone, this thing, COVID-19 is an affliction. It is afflicting humanity and our community. And we need to allow little groups here, little groups there, little groups there, coming in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and praying to arrest this thing for permanent solution.
But you can do that prayer here. I've seen you stand here in your tracksuit and pray. And
Yeah,
I sit
but
on my mobile phone.
I'm saying
You can do
that it's not enough for one person, for individuals to be praying at home alone, because people are discouraged.
Are you relying on the Bible saying one shall put to flight 1,000,
And
two shall put to flight 10,000?
people. You see what we are dealing
The
with.
difference between 1,000 and 10,000
Yes.
with the addition of one
Of
more.
course, of course. What we are doing, like the Bible says in the book of Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, he said, do not assemble yourself or do not stay away from the assembling of yourself together as the manner of some is, especially as you see the day of the Lord approaching. You see, don't avoid the gathering of yourself together. There is something about, the Bible said, if 2 or 3 shall gather. You know, there's something about the gathering of the believers. And I'm not talking about 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 believers. No, I'm saying that we should look at this thing very carefully, because there are so many activities going on all over the place, and believers should be allowed in every community across the nations of the world and in Ghana here to meet 2, 3 times a day to pray. And I'm saying small groups here, 5 here, 10 here, 15 here, 20 here, all over the
Just
country. To pray.
Not to take tithe and offering.
No. To pray and arrest the situation.
Not to sit down and listen to preaching, not the choir sing, after the choir sing,
No.
announcement. Not that kind of church.
I'm talking about aggressive, violent intercession.
I think that message has not come out.
Like we did when Ebola came. You see, the difference between Ebola and COVID-19 is when Ebola came, those days, if you saw the way some of us were aggressive, it's because it was behind our borders here, right here. And we felt that, hey, Charlie, this thing is serious. So if we sit down and play, we are finished. But because this thing originated from China, we took it for granted, even though we felt the urgency in our spirit, and our spiritual senses was indicating that, hey, there is imminent danger. For whatever reason, we ignored it and thought that, oh, it's not going to come here. And so the enemy had time. He bought time to bring this thing here at unawares. He took us by surprise. And we should have gone after it to stop it. We should have taken an aggressive stand, you know, to attack this thing before it came to our borders like we did with Ebola. Because you remember during the time of Ebola, CNN had predicted that the next place it was coming to was Ghana. And some of us came out violently and renounced it and said it will not come to the borders of Ghana.
And it didn't.
It did not come.
Religious institutions that are desirous of opening their premises to their members, such as churches, mosques, and others, must disinfect, fumigate, and put in place the requisite logistics needed to guarantee safe opening and operationing. They must work with the designated regulatory bodies and undertake test runs of the protocols I have outlined.
And I'm saying that on authority, that I'm not saying let us go back to services like we used to do before, but I'm saying that the place of corporate prayer, intercession, is very critical in what we are dealing with. Because this virus is very deadly, it's a killer, it's a spirit of untimely and premature death. And no politician and no doctors out there or scientists have a cure to this thing. And we understand what's going on because the Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, Ephesians 6:12, but against principalities and powers. This is an unseen enemy. And so I'm suggesting that until churches are reopened, there should be some kind of a provision that allows believers in every community in this nation and in other nations to gather 5 here and pray in the morning, 10 here and pray. And that is to say that we should follow all the protocols, the face mask, wash your hands, social distance, all those things.
In the case of Christians, on the first Sunday of reopening, i.e. 7th June, in the case of the Adventists, Saturday, 6th June, and in the case of Muslims, on the first Friday, i.e. Salat al-Jum'ah, on 5th June, to dedicate their worship to prayers for the nation in these challenging times.
If we go back to prayer like never before and see this thing as an affliction, see it as demonic, see it as evil and as spiritual, and let our doctors and our scientists do their job, let the politicians do their job, but let the church also do what we do. And one of the things the Bible says that he said, my house shall be called the house of prayer for all nations. And one of the things we do very well and effectively is prayer. And so I'm saying that let the churches gather in smaller groups in every community.
That message hasn't come out. So the message that you are sending to the government is that the ban should be reviewed, not so that we gather again as a church, not so that on Sunday morning we come as a normal church and we are going through the church processes, waiting for the message and all of that, but so that we can gather to pray. It's a call to prayer.
It's a call to prayer, smaller groups all over the land, because this thing is demonic. And you know, one of the things I strongly believe, it seems to me that this COVID-19 has come to stay. And until we find a vaccine or a cure to it, it's something we have to live with.
So that was the president and the archbishop. Do you think that they were on the same page? Well, I get the impression that they were on the same page, but news coming in all over the country and all over the radio stations and all over online indicate that churches are saying that they are unable to meet. We are not sure whether it's as a result of the limitations that have been imposed on them, especially big churches. I mean, in my church, there are 3,000 people. We will not be able to meet 100 people on a Sunday. You taking that into 3,000, how many services are we going to hold? But should the churches have a different orientation and understand this to be a call to prayer, as the Archbishop is saying, and then come in and pray and go? No church service. We come in and we pray and we go. What he's talking about, the role of corporate prayer. How do you see it? Send it an email. Send a message to us on our Facebook page, Good Evening Ghana Official. This is something that we'll put on our Facebook page tomorrow. The entire 12-minute video. Very beautiful work done by our team of video editors. And we'll get you to look at it once again and again and then make up your mind what you think. Is the president and the Archbishop on the same page? Now, though, welcome back to the show. Let's get into politics. It's heating up, isn't it? Today, the Electoral Commission of Ghana conducted what they call a pilot session of voter registration exercise. All of what they are doing can be made null and void by the Supreme Court because arguments are being heard on Thursday morning, Thursday, June 4th. Arguments are being heard as to whether the Electoral Commission has the legal mandate and the authority to proceed. The Supreme Court is most likely to rule on the matter next week. However, the EC is preparing itself to be ready because they say they are confident that the Supreme Court will agree with them. In looking at all this and in conceptualizing that, we are taking your mind back to 2016 tonight on Good Evening Ghana. We were privileged and honored in 2016 to receive an interview 4 months to the election by the Venerable Charlotte Osei, who was the Electoral Commission's chair. Of course, we know that later events indicated that Madame Osei had to bow out of the office, and the Honorable Jean Mensah is now the Commissioner of the Electoral Commission. In this interview, Charlotte Osei talks about the role of the Electoral Commissioner, what the Electoral Commissioner can do and what the Electoral Commissioner cannot do. It's almost like deja vu because in those days, Charlotte Osei and the NPP were battling each other. The line of cases from the Supreme Court entitled the Abu Ramadan list of cases had just ended. People were saying that she had refused to comply with the court orders, that she should make some deletions in the register. All of these things were going. Here on Good Evening Ghana, we had taken a direct attack on Charlotte Osei, given her posturing at one of the press events and the way in which she treated the media. So there was a lot of talk about her posturing, the way she does her work in the media. It was alleged against her by the position that she had been put there to fix the election for John Dramani Mahamad's second term. And we did put that question to her directly. Have you been put in office to fix John Dramani Mahamad's second term? And she answered the question. Incidentally, we also put another question to her about how she was likely to vote on December 7th, and she told us that she was not going to vote. But it's an interview that was 1 hour, 5 minutes. We spoke about almost everything. We have been looking at the interview ourselves, and it's very revealing to us the kinds of things she said. I mean, history is always important, and video evidence is always very gratifying. So, without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, here's a playback of the 2016 interview right here in these studios with Madame Charlotte Osei, the Electoral Commissioner, the chairman of the Electoral Commission of Ghana, as she then was. Here is the interview. Madam.
Good evening, Paul.
It's been a long day for you, has it?
Pretty long day, but it's good to be here.
It's been a long year as well.
Very long year.
You are hoping and waiting that it's all over?
Sooner than later.
We have a lot to talk about tonight. I'm not sure where to start from, but so many different kinds of things. The exhibition exercise is done, right?
Yes.
So what happened?
It was a good exercise. It's an important exercise as well. There are three main activities in an election calendar: updating the register, exhibiting the register, and then the actual elections. With the exhibition, it's important for people, the relevance is that it gives people the opportunity to make sure that their details have been captured, that they have been captured accurately, to make any changes they want to make to the register. And then there's the bigger one, which is the opportunity for all of us to take part in creating a credible process, which starts from the register, by going there to help the electoral management body object to anybody who we believe should not be on the register, whether because you're a minor, whether because you're a foreigner, whether because you've passed on. So that's the purpose of the exhibition. This year, because of all the challenges and concerns we've had around the register, rather than the usual 2 weeks, we made it a 3-week exhibition. And we introduced the additional aspect of having the biometric verification devices at the exhibition centers. So when people go to the center, they can put their finger, get verified, which gives you the assurance that your fingerprints have been accurately captured. You won't have challenges on election day. But also gives us, as the body in charge of managing the elections, the sense of how effectively and efficiently the systems are working. If there are any changes, we need to know. Some people have poor quality fingerprints. Some is DNA, some is from trauma. So when they put their fingers on the devices and there's a problem, we can put them into the category of face only. And then also it gives us a sense of how well the devices are going to work because of the challenges we had in 2012.
So you deployed 29,000 of them?
Yes.
For this exhibition?
And we had backup as well. So anywhere there was an issue with a device, we had a backup one brought in immediately.
How many people actually took advantage of this exhibition exercise? What, did you get a high score?
Not as high as we had hoped. If you look at the historical data, we usually get about a 40% turnout at exhibition. 2012, it went up to about 63%, I believe. But that's because, you know, in 2012, we migrated to a biometric register, so there was an added incentive for people to go. This year, we're still collating the figures, but in some regions, we exceeded 50%. In most regions, it was in the 40s. But we also had an SMS platform for people who did not want to go to the centers. We did not advertise that aggressively. The reason being that we wanted people to actually use the centers more so they could use the BVDs. We're still collating the figures from those who checked through the SMS platform. So in another couple of days, we would have a better sense of the actual figures.
So it was about the same historically?
Yes.
The enthusiasm levels. Okay. What's happening right now? Yesterday, there was an announcement of electronic voting transmission. You were having a look at some people who, or some companies who will be transmitting ballots electronically, etc., etc.? What's happening? Where is that process? Is it over?
Not electronic voting, certainly.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Not electronic
We're
voting.
talking about electronic voting. I mean electronic transmission.
Electronic transmission of results. After the 2012 election petition, as you know, we set up the Elections Reform Committee. One of the recommendations was that we should have the electronic transmission of results. Now, it does not replace the manual system that we have. The manual system starts from the polling station, where you have the presiding officer sign, or as happened in 2012, not sign.
I don't want to interrupt you when you are telling us about the entire process. So this appears,
it will
be captured in that conversation.
So when the results move, let me just touch on it a bit. The results would move from the polling station where the presiding officer and the agents, the party and candidates agents sign, and then it moves to the collation center. At the collation center, then it is transmitted to the head office. We are still going to maintain that manual process. That's the process under the law. But we are introducing the electronic results, which enables us at head office to see scanned copies of the manual results. So those manual results are the same ones that will be scanned and sent to us.
So let's get a clear understanding. So if this paper is the form that is filled at a polling station, say Metro TV or Laboni Secondary School, and the results are on the paper, so your electronic voting device will transmit that to you.
Electronic transmission device.
Electronic transmission device will transmit that to you electronically?
Yes.
By email or by what?
That is part of the demonstration that is happening now. We started from 17 companies that expressed an interest when we advertised the process in March in the newspapers. We're down to 2 companies now doing the demonstration. Yesterday we started the demonstration. It's a 3-day process. It would end tomorrow.
Will you select 1 or 2?
We'll select 1.
One company will be responsible.
One company will be responsible.
Electronically transmitting sheets from 29,000 polling stations.
They will be responsible for transmitting 29,000 polling station results and 275 collation center results. As to where they will do it is part of what we're going to decide on when they finish the process.
Who and whom are making this decision to select which company does it?
We have an entity tender committee. It has, of course, officials of the Electoral Commission. It has a representative of the Attorney General's Department. It has 2 representatives from the majority and minority side in Parliament. So they form, and then I think the new law now has added 2 independent members. They form the entity tender committee. However, they have not taken the decision by themselves. We have had another evaluation panel that has sifted through the process as we've progressed. Where we've reached now is where the parties, the last shortlisted 5 companies, were asked to bring financial and technical proposals. Those proposals were evaluated. Now, as part of the evaluation process, we are doing this physical demonstration to ensure that what they have said on paper in terms of the technical solution, it's feasible. So we have invited from yesterday political party reps, members of civil society, donor partners, and they've been very graciously supporting us through the process over the 3 days. And of course, engaging the 2 companies, asking questions, bringing concerns up. Concerns came up about the security of the process, how can it be interfered with, how exactly does it work. So we're going through that.
So ultimately, the entity tender committee will make the decision?
Yes. And based on the recommendations, of course, of the evaluation panel. And we do have some independent technical experts that are also supporting.
When the decision is made, will it be made public?
Of course.
Which company has won
of
to
course.
do that? Okay.
Of course.
Okay, so when will that process be over?
I don't know. When they finish this now, we'll now go into the evaluation of the financial proposals, and then a decision will be taken.
Back to the exhibition, and I'd like to introduce electronic voting at this stage since I've been talking about it. How many different ways can people cast their ballot in Ghana?
In Ghana, there's only one way.
To go take a ballot paper and
take a ballot paper, you thumbprint it, you drop it into the ballot box.
So Ghanaians abroad will do the same for the embassies, those? I'm not talking about ROPA, but I'm talking about the regular military people.
They will do it through proxy voting.
Proxy voting to be done in Ghana?
Yes.
So this year you are not taking in results from external?
No, we would send them the proxy and they can appoint proxies here who would vote on their behalf.
That's the only way they can vote?
Yes.
So if you don't have a proxy, you lose your vote?
You will find a proxy.
You have to find one?
You will find one.
Is that how it's been in the past?
Yes. Surely there's somebody you
So
can
when
trust.
they talked of overseas voting in the election petition, what did it mean?
It was overseas registration, not voting. People who had registered abroad.
So have people registered abroad in this process?
No, this time we did not open that process up.
So no Ghanaian abroad registered abroad?
No.
They had to come home to do that?
They had to come home to do that. But it's something that is part of our strategic plan in terms of enabling Ghanaians who are outside to vote.
Do you have plans in your strategic plan to introduce electronic voting at some stage?
The strategic plan covers the next 5 years, and no. And that's because when we had the reform committee, the sentiment from the stakeholders, political parties and civil society, was that we're not ready for electronic voting. And when you think about it, we have a process where we are manually voting, manually counting it, and there's still such a high level of mistrust. I cannot imagine what will happen with an electronic voting.
When you talk of mistrust, you bring me to validation. There's been this big fight about validation. And the issues, madam, has been that Charlotte Osei doesn't want to do validation. She's against it. My understanding of validation, and correct me if I'm wrong, is same as you exhibited. So we turn up to look at our names, and everyone must turn up. If you don't turn up, your name is deleted. The suspicion arose because we have 14 million people on the register, and those who are suspicious of the figures say that if you ask the Electoral Commission to produce 14 million different human beings, they will not be able to do that. So to check that, let's all go. If you don't come, you're out. Is that validation? Is that the correct understanding of validation?
Yeah, validation did become a very troublesome word.
They say you are opposed to it.
I don't think I have personally advocated any position that was wholly mine. I chair a commission. I'm not a sole commissioner. There's 7 of us in terms of taking the big strategic and policy decisions. And so when I speak, I'm articulating the position of the commission and not a personal position. The view of the commission was that validation was not supported by the law.
It's not supported by the law.
It's not supported by law. There is no law that makes exhibition compulsory. There is no law that empowers the Electoral Commission to remove names of people from the register if they do not show up for an exhibition. If you take the current figures we have, if 40% of people came for this last exhibition, it means that 60% of the voters will be taken off the register under the presumption that they do not exist. We have not given them the opportunity to rebut that presumption. As you know, the rules of natural justice or the alteram partem, you need to give people a right to be heard. And so the commission felt we could not do that because it was not supported by law. Of course, the law could have been changed to support that, but there's a process.
What law exists that does not support this validation process?
The law that empowers the commission to take people's names off if they don't show up for an exhibition.
Okay.
Because that would mean that if you fell ill, you had malaria, you had emergency surgery, you had to travel, you had a family funeral outside the country, by the time you came back, we would have taken your name off the register under the presumption that you did not exist. We didn't have that power. The law could have been changed, yes, but there's a process for changing the law. The EC.
This law you talk about, what kind of law is it? Is it a CI?
No, as in
is it an
to
act
put
of parliament?
that into the CI.
Yes, the existing one is a CI.
Yes.
So changing it would be a CI as well.
Yes.
Okay.
But you would have needed to insert that into the law to give the EC the power to do that. For you to do that is a process that all the parties should have agreed to. You should start with consensus at IPAC. And then from IPAC, it goes to the legal committee of IPAC where the parties are represented, civil society is represented, and then it goes to Parliament. We all engage with the subsidiary legislation committee, and then it is passed. So there's a process. The Electoral Commission has to enforce the law. Not the law as we would want it. Not the law as political parties want it, but the law as the law is. And we have a lot of independence in the Constitution.
But did this conversation about validation start within the IPAC or
No, it did
at
not.
your desk, and where did it end? It didn't start?
The first time we heard, actually, it was from radio, I think.
That some people were calling for it?
Calling for it. We had had some engagement in Parliament. Personally, I talked to some members of Parliament who had articulated it, and I said, it may be a good idea, but we need to look at the law. And eventually, when it did end up in the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court upheld the position of the Electoral Commission that validation was a non-statutory remedy. You could not ask an institution to basically take actions which are not supported by law. And that as much as the Electoral Commission is independent, that independence is circumscribed by law. And so as a commission, we have a duty to follow the law as is, and not as we want it to be.
This was in Abu Ramadan?
Yes.
The Supreme Court in Abu
I
Ramadan.
think the third.
Well, those who have, the advocates of validation, have pointed to Nigeria.
Yeah.
And they said this process occurred in Nigeria. And it took out 25 million people from the Nigerian electoral roll. That's part of the credibility that the Nigerian process of last year also gained, because the electoral roll was cleaned up, so to speak. Do you know is that correct? Is that a position from Nigeria?
Not exactly. We've had a lot of engagements with Professor Cheka. As you know, I'm also president of the African Association of Electoral Authorities. So,
you?
Yes.
Are president already?
Yes.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Why did you stand for election? Did they appoint you?
They elected me last year, but that's also because Ghana was selected to host the permanent secretariat of the association.
Okay.
So there's a lot of engagement that goes on between electoral commissions in Africa, and previous commissioners are also very useful and very supportive. You have to understand where Professor Jega started from and where they arrived at. We can't just make assumptions. Professor Jega, if I recall, was appointed in June of 2010. His first election was April of 2011. By his own admission, it was not a fantastic election. It didn't go too great. They had a bloated register, but the results were generally accepted, and Dr. Goodluck Jonathan was sworn in as president. Now, between 2011 and 2015, when the last elections happened, they had a 4-year period to really roll out massive changes. And one of the things they did, of course, was to clean up their register. The first thing they did, actually, was to have a strategic plan in place, re-engineer their processes, because your internal processes must support the reforms and the way you want to deploy the election. So they did a lot of internal work. When it came to their register, what they did was deduplication.
Deduplication?
Deduplication.
What's that?
Deduplication, when you have a biometric register, is a process where you use the automatic fingerprint identification system to run through that database. So any fingerprints that appear more than once
will be taken off automatically?
Will be taken. Well, in Ghana, I don't know how they did it in theirs, but in Ghana, we would go through an adjudication process which involves political parties and civil society and make a determination. But they did that. So automatically, all the people who had taken part in multiple registration, that popped out. So that would reduce your numbers. Then the next thing they did was, he calls it visual validation. So you go through your register, you see names like Mike Tyson, Queen Elizabeth II. They took those names out. Then
That's interesting.
They looked at people that were minors.
How did they know they were minors?
Visual.
Photograph?
Yes, they took them out. And if the laws permit them to do that, that's fine. But we have to work within our law and the kind of processes we built up. In Ghana, we do adjudication with the political parties and civil society. It's not an EC-only process, and we take a decision as to all the multiples and all that. The next thing Professor Jega did was to introduce I think they call it the permanent voter card, which is their voter ID card, which is readable. And then they introduced the smart cards, so that before you voted, you would have to go to the polling station with your permanent voter card and get it. They also had challenges there with the distribution of the permanent voter cards. So there were millions of people who also did not get their cards and could not work. By his own admission, our system is actually a better system, because you don't need your card to vote, and you need your finger. And we have eliminated multiple registration, which eliminates impersonation. And because of the biometric verification system, we've also eliminated multiple voting. with some of the policy decisions we're rolling out in this year's election, it's going to be, overvoting is going to be difficult because we have changed the definition of what constitutes overvoting. So we have a tighter system, really. And JEGA did a lot for Nigeria, but
that means that the laws that we apply in Ghana are not the same as Nigeria, are not even similar in terms of what you can do with taking out names of the register.
No, but that's the thing. All electoral systems operate within the laws of their jurisdiction. When we meet together, we try and learn best practices from each other and try and implement it in our countries. There are some good things Professor JEGA did outside of the law. Yeah. I think that their communications was way better than ours has been in terms of engaging the electorate and educating the electorate. So there were things we could learn. We are learning from them.
So as we speak, validation out, as you said, by the Supreme Court. You finish your exhibition. What else will happen to the register?
We have recently reopened the window for continuous voter registration. So anybody who missed the earlier registration process can now, on the 19th and the 26th of August, they can go and register. Then the people who were affected by the ruling on NHIS cards have up till the 12th of August to register. When they finish that process, we would exhibit their registers together, their provisional register. When we finish that, while that is going on, for all of us who took part in the exhibition and objections were filed, the court process will start working on those objections. Then we finalize the register. When the court gives an order.
NHIS card registrants, big issue, a lot of hula baloo, and you told the Supreme Court you only had 56,000. Some people said it was 4 million. The journalists who saw the bags that went to the Supreme Court said that there were so many and mighty that it should be millions. Most Ghanaians were surprised at your 56,000. Where did you get that from?
I was surprised.
You were?
I was at this 56 because...
You were expecting more?
I was expecting more.
Why were you expecting more?
Because of all the rhetoric that had happened around it. Nobody had ever checked, mind you, because the information was not available on the database. It was only available on the actual Forms 1A that were filled when people went to register. Now, those forms had a column for NID, National Identity Number.
Let me just interrupt you. I'll come back to this 56,000 question. My producer says your battery is going off and so your sound is going a bit low. Okay. I hope that you are making notes and you are listening attentively. This is one of the most important people in Ghana sitting with us now. She alone, and we'll come to that, will declare the president-elect sometime in December 9th, 10th, something like that, or she will be announcing a second round of the election. Only Charlotte Osei can do that. After the break, we'll continue the conversation with her. We'll be right back.
I think it's important.
Yeah, I'll come to that. Thank you very much. We hear that our Twitter page is buzzing. People are following us in leaps and bounds. Thank you very much for following. After the interview, we'll give our own assessment of this one. And we're happy that you're enjoying it. People were asking also where my spectacles is. They just arrived, didn't they? Thanks. So 56,000. You were surprised. We were surprised. Everyone was surprised. How did they get the figure? What did they add up to find it?
When the ruling was given, the Supreme Court basically gave us 4 or 5 days to present the list. So we called all the district officers, and then we sent a memo and said, you must start going through all the Forms 1A from 2012, and anyone you see where this is the way the NHIS number, it's an 8-digit number, if I recall. So when you see a digit number is presented this way, it's a passport number, this way is a driver's license, but when you see 8 digits in this format, it is an NHIS number. So extract all the forms with those numbers. So it was a manual physical process.
Yeah, but you were dealing with 14 million forms.
Thereabouts. So they did that.
In 5 days?
Yes, but it's in over 200 offices.
Okay.
It's not all in one location. So they did that, and then they were asked to send all the lists and the forms, the actual forms, to their regional offices, where again they sat through the night and basically checked it. And then the forms and the list compiled at the regional levels were forwarded to head office, where again we had a team in the big IPAC room going through it and just checking it. And so we compiled the list and we sent it to the Supreme Court.
Is it possible that there are still some in there that your people didn't find?
It's possible. It was a human process.
Right now,
that's why the Supreme Court also said that delete all the names you have submitted to us and any others you may find.
Okay. Are you still searching?
We haven't had the time to search again, but we did open it up to anybody who knew anyone or who was affected to come
If
forward.
I came to you now and I said I have 10 relatives who registered with NHIS, you did not delete their names. Their names are still on. What would you say to me?
You would also have to show me how you know and how you can establish for a fact.
Because they told me.
But most people don't even remember what they registered with. I had to go and check to make sure my name was not on the list because I couldn't recall what I registered with.
So
do you
remember?
Do you remember what you registered with?
It must be passport, I think.
Well, nobody's
So
sure.
you will doubt if I say 10 people, my 10 relatives say that they use NHIS?
If they said they did, what we would do, and that's what we had prepared for, we would go back and find out where did they register and look into the forms and extract their forms and be sure that they actually registered with that, and then we'll take the necessary action in
When will you
compliance with
close the
Supreme Court.
door on this process?
The door would close tomorrow.
Well, so if on December 1st, I come to you and I said, 10 people are on, they just arrived from America. They say they are on. Because the Supreme Court says that you have to delete. So if they are on, then your register is not credible.
If we check, and it doesn't mean the register is not credible.
If NHIS registrants are on.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's not credible. The Supreme Court said allow them to delete their names and give them the opportunity to re-register. And that was the recognition that there may be people there who are affected by the ruling, who are Ghanaians.
Yeah. Yeah.
When the Supreme Court says delete the names of those who registered, it is because the presumption of their citizenship has been rebutted. And so they now have to prove it. So there are a lot of people who also registered who were Ghanaian citizens, so they must be given the opportunity to re-register and to participate in the process. If it does come up that it turns up in December, we may have to go to the Supreme Court for clarification, because if you delete other points, the opportunity for them to register and take part in the elections is gone.
That's what I'm asking. When are you closing the door on that?
It's closing tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since you were appointed, you've been criticized, especially by the opposition. Even us have had the opportunity to be worried about your rebranding and all of that. Canada Japan says that what he said is a joke, so we will not talk about it, but that was quite bad. How do you feel about being criticized by the opposition? They think that you want to rig the election for President Mahama and the NDC. How have you felt about that? And what assurances can you give to a Ghanaian who is not a member of the NPP, not a member of the NDC, that Charlotte Osei will not or cannot rig the election?
I think the assurance should go to all Ghanaians, not just to, we can't exclude people who are members of the NDC or the NPP. The challenge is that criticisms by themselves are not bad. I think for all of us, we need criticisms to improve upon whatever we're doing. The problem is with unfounded allegations, you know, comments that are without basis. Some are just malicious, some are mischievous. So if you put out, for instance, that I have run for office.
As a member of parliament, yes, I saw that.
Exactly. When I've never actually been a member of a political party, then that is troubling, because you are seeking to attack the credibility of the institution. When it comes to Charlotte Osei rigging the elections, it's important that we focus on the process and not the person. I believe we should have a process that is so strong that regardless of how malevolent Charlotte Osei wants to be, she should not be able to rig the elections. And that's precisely the kind of process we have.
We'll come to that for you to walk us through the details of the process. So
basically, it is
so you want
possible.
to build the process and the systems such that it's not even possible for anyone, as you said, malevolent, to rig the election. Have you built that process now? Would you say you have?
We have a really, really credible process. And
what's the difference between what we have now and what we had in 2012? Any 3 or 4 major differences that will tell us that, yes, we are in a different place?
We have improved the system. We're rolling out 27 electoral reforms.
27?
Yes. But even as of 2012, compared to other countries, we have a very good system. We have a high level of mistrust, and we tend to focus on persons. And so Charlotte Osei has been appointed, and she's coming to install a president. But it's just not possible under the system, because for Charlotte Osei to do that, she has to get the support and active involvement of her 6 co-commissioners, her 10 regional directors, the 200+ district electoral officers, the 275 returning officers, and their 2 assistants. And then when you get to the polling station, for this year's elections, there's going to be 145,000 people working at the polling stations. Charlotte Osei has to make those people all decide to toe one line.
Well, but you are the final decision maker, not them.
I will explain why I'm not the final decision maker. And then you are likely to have over 500,000 agents for candidates and parties, and then 2 counting agents per candidate at the collation centers. All these people must actively be working and changing the documents for Charlotte Osei to rig the elections. So I need to convince 500,000 plus people to skew the system in favor of one person. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. And it's not even a part of my value system.
It's your announcement that matters.
No, it's not a part of my value system that I would do that. Yes, I get to announce the results of just the presidential election. But it's an onerous responsibility, and it's a great honor to do that, to get to declare who has won the presidency. But what you're actually doing is more of a chief servant role and not a chief organizer role. The process has happened. It's gone through 29,000 polling stations, 275 collation centers. It's been signed off by officials and agents at all those levels. It's come to the National Collation Center. The parties have seen the results, they've signed off. We have compared the results with results by independent entities like Codeo's parallel voter tabulation. And when you are very comfortable that the result expresses the will of the people, then you get to announce that. So you are actually the voice of the ballot box. Because the 2 things that the Electoral Commission is subject to are the law and the opinion of the people as expressed in the ballot box. And that's why when you read our Constitution, the ultimate power in our Constitution is the people of Ghana. And the election gives them the opportunity to express that sovereignty. It is that power is reserved for the people of Ghana who get up and queue and go and vote. Your work as the returning officer for the presidential elections is to make sure that what the majority of people say is what you declare. You don't go and declare what you want to declare. You are subject to the will of the people as expressed in the ballot boxes. So it's a great honor, but it doesn't, we are giving too many powers to the voice. So I'll give you an example.
Honor, not a power. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, if you have an announcer in a boxing tournament,
yes,
who tallies up the votes, the numbers, the marks that the judges have awarded to the boxer, the announcer comes to announce what the judges have decided. In this case, the people are the judges. The announcer does not have the power to change what the judges have said. And remember, the judges are sitting there. So you are just a voice. That's what you are as a returning officer. You announce what the will of the people is.
Okay, that's well said. I'm tempted to come to the process because I think it will take you 3 minutes to walk us through that. But let's come to one controversial issue that came up recently about the political parties law and whether parties are obeying the political parties law. Mrs. Rawlings was unhappy with your comments that you were going to sanction parties who they don't either have offices and all of that, and perhaps they will be disqualified from competing for the presidential election. What is the qualification criteria for a political party to participate in the presidential election?
There is no qualification criteria in that sense. There's a qualification for being licensed to be a political party. I don't know where Mrs. Rawlings got my comments because I never actually made any comments.
No, you gave a deadline of something.
We wrote, and it wasn't Charlotte Osei. The Electoral Commission wrote to political parties and said, by a certain date, you must give us your audited accounts. I think by May 30th, and you must also give us a list of your offices throughout the nation. Now, if you walk back to last year, at the July or August IPAC meeting, we had told political parties very clearly that we have had a political parties law from the year March 2000. It's been almost totally ignored by political parties. But when you look at that law, it's a really important part of our governance process because it puts obligations on political parties as to funding.
So were you going to sanction those who don't send you their audited
We did not
accounts?
even talk about sanctions, but we did tell them that we were going to start enforcing the law. Now, if you're going to go into a compliance, you are a regulatory body, you need to start getting people to start understanding what their obligations under the law are. If you seek to govern this country through the vehicle of a political party, we think it's important that you must learn to respect the political party law and the provisions. So there are all sorts of sanctions in that law, and there are all kinds of responsibilities and obligations. For instance, parties are supposed to tell us the sources of their expenditure.
Tell you by writing to you?
Tell us how they've expended money and how they got that funding. Yes.
By writing to you?
Yes.
So
By giving us audited accounts.
If they don't do it, what happens?
They can be delicensed. It's in the law. They can lose their licenses. We did not even start saying we're going to cancel your licenses. We just said, let's start respecting the law.
Do you plan to do any enforcement in that regard towards 2016?
Not in 2016.
Not in this year?
At least the Commission has not taken that decision, but we have agreed, and we told them from last year that get your house in order by December 31st, because we will start, and that was one of the first steps.
December 31st, 2016?
Last year, 2015.
Okay.
We gave them advance
But you're
warning.
not going to de-license anyone?
Not that I'm aware of at this point. We haven't taken a decision, but we're also working with the UNDP. There's a project, the JPAS project, to work with political parties to build their institutional capacity so that they start governing themselves and managing their affairs in a more, get more institutionalized and manage their affairs like proper institutions and stop the ad hoc kind of
Every
management.
4 years kind of thing.
Yes, so we're working with them on that. We need to grow their capacity as well.
If you're watching Good Evening Ghana, yes, obviously that's Charlotte Osei, the chair of the Electoral Commission. She's in our studios tonight to help us understand what's going on right now with the Electoral Commission and to help you understand as well. As we said, send your comments to our Facebook page and then we will gladly read it or send them to her, those questions that we don't have answers to. So I wake up on December 7th and I go to cast my ballot at Lada de Kutupon, a polling station called Palm Wine Junction. What happens after that?
The process starts from before that. When we're printing the ballot papers with political parties present, we print it, we move the materials to the polling station. On election day, before you even get to cast your vote, the parties and their agents have to make sure that the boxes are empty. They put their own seals on the boxes, and then we put our seals on the boxes. We open voting, and then you cast. You get the privilege to cast your vote.
Yes.
Did you take part in the exhibition?
Yes, I did.
You verified
yes,
yourself?
yes, I
okay,
did.
so you're pretty certain that it will go well on election day.
Yeah.
So after you cast your vote, when voting closes at 5 p.m., you also have the opportunity to come and watch the counting process. So the votes are counted in the public view. The presiding officer would fill out the forms, and he would tally it up. Hopefully he will remember to sign this time, otherwise sanctions will be applied. Sanctions have been introduced in the law. The party
Does
agents,
it invalidate that if he doesn't sign?
No.
You will still count it?
Yes.
Okay.
So if the agents have any basis to challenge the results, there's a form they can fill, and then we'll look into it.
Okay.
But once the agents have signed off, and he has signed, but they will sign this time.
Hopefully, yeah.
No, they will sign.
Okay.
Sanctions, there are new sanctions in the law
Okay,
this time.
yeah.
It's a stricter process. So he signs, and then we would declare the results at the polling station. And then your ballots are put into envelopes per candidate. Each
The
candidate,
physical ballot?
yes, each candidate has their
Each parliamentary and presidential candidate?
Yes, they are tamper-proof envelopes. Those envelopes and the result sheets are taken to the Constituency Collation Center. So all the results, if you have 100 polling stations in the constituency, all the results will come there. When they come there, then the collation process starts. The candidates have counting agents, the candidates themselves and their spouses are allowed in the room.
What are we counting again?
You are now tallying the results on the on all the polling stations.
So my polling station, Power Junction 98, plus Labone Secondary School 25, that kind of thing.
It's not just 25 for every candidate.
Yes, I'm talking about one candidate.
Yes.
Any one candidate.
Yes.
So you're doing
Onto
98 plus
sheet.
25 plus 31 plus 76.
Yes.
Who is doing that?
The returning officer.
At
who has
midnight,
2 deputies.
At midnight.
Well, that's his job.
And his returning officer has been awake since AM.
Yes.
And this is midnight.
Well, that's his job. And then you have he has 2 assistants, so they could have done a shift system. And then you have the counting agents, 2 per candidate. They are also in there.
2 per parliamentary, 2 per presidential.
Yes.
Okay.
Because each one, you have to have them focus on the one that they're counting for. So when he finishes and they tally it, then they all sign off. This year we're going to have screens at the constituency collation centers.
CCTV or television? Or both?
It's likely television, or if we think that some angry loser may destroy it, likely projector screens.
Oh, that means Metro TV can be at Labone Secondary School, which is the coalition center for Adom-Otchere, and beam it live to our people.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
So
that's new.
That's new. It's one of the reforms. So we'd have the
so people can
there.
actually see. So
Yes.
at Metro TV, we can be looking at 25, 36 screens and showing it to viewers when we like.
Yes.
As we want.
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting.
And that's where the results of the parliamentary elections are declared.
Yeah.
So the returning officer would announce who has won the parliamentary elections for that constituency.
Would he also announce the presidential?
No.
At all?
That's not his business.
Okay. Just clarification.
That comes to us.
Yes. So these are your people doing the electronic transmission. What would they have done by this time?
When they would have scanned the polling station, your Panwine Junction polling station
they would have
results, and the coalition one, and sent it to us.
Okay, so by this time where they are putting the coalition thing together in Labone Secondary School for the Adom-Otchere, you, Electoral Commission Chair, and your people would have already received the electronic transmission of all the polling stations?
Yes, but those are provisional results.
I know. So you can actually be doing some coalition there as well?
Yes.
Okay, of
So
the
that
same
by
thing
the
they are
time
doing in Labone Secondary School?
by the time the manual one comes in, you can check and see if there's any discrepancy. You can zero in immediately on what the problem is and start resolving the discrepancy.
So after the parliamentary is declared, they then send the presidential physically to you?
No.
The coalition paper and
the coalition sheets now go to our regional offices, because when you're talking about presidential, you're looking at a regional level where it is put together and then it is sent fax to head office.
Fax?
To the National Collation Center.
So when they are faxing, what are they faxing?
The collated regional
of the
results.
constituencies in the region?
Yes.
What about the polling station?
No, which is why we now have the electronic transmission, so we get to see that.
So electronic transmission would have given you the polling station, but you're not going to get a physical copy of the polling station?
Eventually you will get it.
Okay,
but at this
not the
point,
same time?
Yes, not the same day, because you're
would
trying
you
to
wait for it to make
If there's a discrepancy, we would have to wait and see it.
Okay, so if the electronic comes into you and a political party says, this is not what my people say.
Exactly, we need to see.
You wait for the physical one.
Because the physical one prevails if there's a discrepancy.
And it's going to be faxed?
Yes.
Is that safe?
Oh, it is. But
why don't they bring it physically to you?
Eventually comes physically, but remember that you're also trying to do this as quickly as possible. And you also have the candidates' agents at the National Collation Center. So they are actually checking. So if there's no issue, there's no problem, because they have agents on the ground they're talking to and comparing the results. So the electronic ones will be provisional because they'll come in faster.
Yeah.
If there's a discrepancy, the manual one is the one we would revert to. I'm doubtful myself as to where the discrepancy will come from, because the electronic one is actually scanning the already signed off results.
And this is the first time we're doing this scan?
Yes.
And it's part of the Supreme Court recommendations?
It was not part of the Supreme Court recommendations. When we were doing the reforms and looking at the Supreme Court petition, the reforms went way beyond just a simple Supreme Court recommendations. So it is more than that, but it was one of the requirements from the parties. And it does make sense that if you are the returning officer, when you are the returning officer for a constituency, you get to see all the polling station results as you're tallying. So if you are the returning officer for the presidential, which is what the commission is, I just speak for the commission, we also need to see all the
So you would have access to 29,000 polling station results for the presidential election?
Yes.
29,000.
Yes.
All will be at your disposal.
Yes.
Wow.
So
Okay,
if there's any issue like we had the last time, it's also very easy for you to find them.
So let's come to your strong room. How is it going to look like? Afarijan's strong room looked quite simple from what we saw in Jairus Mayer's movie. Media was not allowed in there. We knew political parties were there. Sometimes they quarreled and they'll come out and tell us what's happening. Are you also going to call it a strong room, or is it a green room, blue room?
No, there are no jewels to protect, so it's not going to be a strong room, and there's certainly no money in there. It's going to be the National Collation Center, and so it's going to be more open because there's really nothing strange that happens in the strong room. When parties quarrel, they're quarreling over their figures and what they think. But if we open up that process, and as it comes in, the parties have their desk in there, and they're all doing their collation, and we're all comparing figures, which is really what it is. Because the point is that by the time you are announcing the results, everybody is comfortable.
How are you going to design that strong room? Who's going to be there?
The party, every candidate is entitled to 2 counting agents.
Presidential only?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So the parties would have
2 counting agents.
The candidates would have their agents there. We would give some media access. We don't want too many cameras running in there, so we would streamline it in some way. And as the results come in, we will be announcing it. We're not going to, as we finalize.
You'll be announcing the presidential as they come in?
As they come in. We'll be finalizing and announcing before the final announcement.
So if you have Ashanti region coming, you will tell us?
Yes.
That in Ashanti region, John Dramani Mahama
these are the signed of results,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
So that we also reduce that tension and
at the end.
mystery, yes.
Okay. So you announce Northern region, Central region. So you're going to announce it in regional blocks?
As it comes in, we'll announce. We don't know exactly whether we'll wait for the entire region.
But you have to finish one region before you can announce it? Or are you going to say with 40% of the votes
Exactly. This is where we are.
That's more crucial than... That's going to create tension, wouldn't it?
I don't think so. I think it actually opens it up more.
So you're going to say,
the tension.
with 40% of the votes in, with 40% counted, so and so is in the lead.
You can say with so many constituencies in Ashanti region out of 20 constituencies out of 35 constituencies.
This is where
we are, yes.
That's going to be new.
We have to demystify it because there's really no mystery about it. But the secrecy and the not informing people as the process rolls out is what creates this great mystery of...
But you alone are going to make all those announcements?
No.
Who else is going to make? You will make the final one.
Why do you want to take all the...
Well, but I thought
it's
you
like
are the
you want to
returning
open
officer.
Your Christmas presents on...
Well, if somebody is not a returning officer, why are you allowing him or her to
I get to make the final results. The final announcement.
The final one. Yes. That's what the returning officer means.
Yes.
But you don't want to make the intermediate ones.
That's going to be a lot of work. I'll need like 3 clones.
I see. Okay, so that's interesting. So by December, what are we expecting results? Because this look like a more detailed process than we're used to. And you're going to do with more papers.
It's actually the same process.
Yes, but you're going to do with more papers. Somebody says this, you have to wait for that.
That has always been the process.
They didn't used to have scanned, electronically transmitted anything.
Yes, but that is a faster process than the manual. But the manual is still the main mode, and we announce in 2 days. So it's the same process.
So you're going to announce in 2 days?
Yes.
Let's come to the controversy that occurred in 2008 over spoiled ballots, rejected ballots.
2008?
2008 election, yes. There appears to have been in that election a certain jump in the number of spoiled ballots, hugely significant, over 200,000, you know, and it became confusing, deducting the so-called spoiled or rejected ballots from the total votes cast and being sure that a candidate has not crossed the 50% plus 1 to be elected president, etc., etc. First of all, tell us, what is spoiled ballot and what is rejected ballot?
A spoiled ballot is not in the ballot box, to put it simply.
It's not in?
It's not inside the ballot box. When you go to vote, you can go and actually vote and change your mind. You don't put it in the box, you go back and you get another ballot paper. That's a spoiled ballot. A rejected ballot is in the ballot box, but does not disclose the actual intention of the voter. So maybe you didn't mark any, you didn't make any mark on it, or your thumbprint is in between 2 boxes, and so it's an indeterminate vote. So that's a rejected ballot. And it's a big concern. In fact, in our strategic plan, one of the targets we have is that by 2020 we'll reduce rejected ballots by 50%. There are a lot of reasons why rejected ballots happen. And we've been fortunate in that there's been quite a bit of research that has gone into it by civil society groups. I think the NCC recently has done some research on spoiled rejected ballots. And we've seen some academic papers, people send it to us, and we've studied all of them closely. The reasons range from high consumption of alcohol on election day. Yes. Then there's some people are just anxious or nervous about the entire process.
We also know that, or we heard that possibility of some people deliberately doing it.
Yes, there's a malevolence of the person who is counting, and we're addressing all that as we.
So what is the main thing you're going to change to help us reduce these rejected ballots?
We're doing a lot because we're attacking it on all the fronts. It's not a one-man approach. There's also the protest vote.
What's protest vote?
Where rather than vote for a person, they decide to basically
stick it on the face.
Exactly.
To punish the person.
Yes, in your face of the candidate. So
the candidate they don't like.
Yes. So we have to approach it holistically. There's also mixed messaging in terms of the voter education, where the ballot paper, the orientation of the ballot paper requires that you vote this way, but a lot of the messaging goes that way. And when people go and vote this way, then it tends to run through the boxes into another box. So we're looking at all kinds of things. We're looking at the education aspect. We're working very closely with the National Commission for Civic Education. We'll also be working with civil society organizations. We will do a lot of outreach ourselves on how to vote.
To help that process.
We're also looking at changing the orientation of the ballot paper. Is one of the things the Commission is looking at. We're looking at if we do simulated voting, go to churches and just engage people and come and do a practice vote, it would probably reduce the tension and the anxiety on election day. So we're approaching it on several levels.
People on Facebook watching have sent messages. We've selected some of them to read to you. And Samuel Chere says, as the EC chairperson, why the NDC is doing her PR for the NDC is not doing her PR for us. No.
I don't
Thank
know
you
why.
for listening anyway. Bernard says, please ask her what is the meaning of the new logo of the EC and why did she change the old one? And if she's a good believer in God and she likes peace, that she should maintain the peace of this nation. It will clear our minds. Okay. I'll come to that, whether you're a believer or not. Emmanuel Donko says, please ask her if she has ever contested as an NDC parliamentary candidate. She's just addressed that. She says she has not. She's never been a member of any political party. And one says, Madiba Omar says, do you feel that your work is difficult, especially the pressure from the two big political parties? Well, we have addressed that as well. On Twitter, Bansi says that, I love Madame Charlotte Osei's response so much. Brilliant answers. Samuel Bryan Boabin says, I'm not sure she is in firm control of her job. She needs to do more to show her neutrality. P says, elections gives Ghanaians the power to express their sovereignty. By Charlotte Osei. I really like what you have said. Elections give Ghanaians power to express. So that's a headline on Peace FM right now, picking from this program. Atta Safo says that my guest tonight, blah, blah, blah. Another one says that I'm enjoying listening to her. She should be engaging a bit more. Okay, so that's coming from our people. About a logo. Why did you change it?
It wasn't my decision. The Commission decided to. We need a strategic plan. We are a leading electoral commission on the continent.
Is the old one bad?
We didn't have one. It had expired.
That means what? Expired?
I mean, strategic plans lapse.
Okay.
And so we had to do a new strategic plan.
This for a coat of arms thing, was that not your logo?
I'm not talking logo, I'm talking strategic plan.
Okay, yeah.
And in doing the strategic plan, we had the benefit of a lot of consultants, external consultants who advise on different aspects, HR, media, image, and we were advised that we needed to address the logo. You need to, if you are leading a big organization like the EC, you are leading people. We needed something that, we needed new values, we needed to revitalize the place, we needed to change how we do our business, and there was the opinion that was strongly advocated that we needed to change the logo, which was accepted by the Commission.
What does the new one mean?
And as a lawyer, you also know that there's an old law against bastardizing the coat of arms,
Yes.
using the coat of arms. You
Yes.
can't just take the coat of arms and stick a ballot box in there. And so we went into a consultative process among ourselves, and we selected the new logo. Because you also wanted something that was a bit more vibrant, that we could take our people along and take the electorate along. And so the new logo spoke to the new values, the inclusiveness, the fact, and even our tag-of-line is for the people, because we wanted even our staff to recognize that everything we do is for the people of Ghana, not for political parties. They represent the people, yes, but for the totality of the people of Ghana. And that is what we must always put first. And so that came out of that entire process, but it came with a strategic plan.
Let me not forget this question about how many people would you be recruiting? Because the last time there were issues about teachers.
Yes.
So you're recruiting about how many odd hands do you need for this process?
The hands we need and the hands we're recruiting are different. The ones we are recruiting are going to be about 146,000.
146,000.
Yes.
You're going to recruit these?
Yes.
How? Criteria?
We set up a committee, and that committee has set out different qualifications and skill sets that we require for every electoral officer. And so we are going to be working with that. We would advertise the positions publicly. We would have an online application system.
Who is disqualified from applying?
I will get to that. But we have skill set. One of them is because we need it to be technologically savvy, we're going to do an online application process. When you go through that, then we will vet you. We will seek views from the community about you. And then we would interview you, and then you're appointed. But even after you're appointed, and that's where your issue comes in, political parties and people in the community, we usually would have to print your names and your pictures out, and they have a right to object to you on the grounds that you're not politically neutral. So political neutrality is one of the key grounds. And so when we go through it, if they object to you, then we have to take you off and get somebody else.
That's a tedious process. When do you hope to start and
Elections
finish?
are tedious.
Yeah, I know that. But when do you hope to start and finish this one?
As soon as we finish the exhibition, the next stage is the elections. And so we start that process, and then we start the training.
That's interesting. How many presidential candidates are you expecting for this election?
I wouldn't know until September the 30th when I receive nominations.
It closes on September the 30th?
Yes.
Okay. And
We'll
then
start 29th and 30th.
Or 2 days?
Yes.
And you're balloting when? When are you balloting for spaces?
We would fix that when we finish. The commission hasn't decided on that yet.
But you feel the sense of the responsibility on you, don't you?
I feel the sense of the responsibility on the
You are
commission.
young. You are.
I'm not that
first.
young.
Well, you're younger than electoral commissioners across Africa. When you meet them, are you not the youngest? Yes, I think
I
you
didn't
are.
ask their ages.
I think you are. And you came from a background of what? You were a private legal practitioner. That's what you were.
I've been a lot of things. I've been in banking.
Oh, you've been in banking?
I was in private practice. Then I went into banking. Then I lectured part-time for 5 years on the side, commercial law and contracts. And then I set up a private legal firm. I did a lot of commercial law. And then I came into public service when I was appointed to the NCC.
NCC. So you were kind of wealthy before you got into public?
I wouldn't describe myself as
from
wealthy.
what you're saying, and you were a WEF, World Economic Forum winner, isn't it, of that award? You are one of the few Ghanaians who have been there.
I have spoken at WEF Africa platforms, yes.
But you were wealthy before?
I'm not wealthy.
Is your salary good?
Could be better.
Could be better.
I'm sure like you think about yours as well.
Are you earning 40,000 cedis a month, for instance? The
No,
old
I'm
400
not.
million?
No,
You're
I'm not.
Don't you think, if you were talking about reforms, that the salary of the kind of job that you do should be really good?
That
So
is
that you
taken
cannot
up
be bribed.
by the. Well, why would anyone bribe me, really?
Oh yeah, because I want to do well in the election or something.
But I can't help you in the elections process. You're better off bribing the 145,000 officials and the agents of the other candidates than bribing me. It's totally redundant.
Would you vote? Would you exercise your rights to vote on voting day? Because we've been talking about this symbolism of impartiality of the referee in such a tense mistrust, as you put it, this kind of atmosphere. Would you vote?
First, I will not be voting on election day like you. I'll be voting on the
special voting.
Special voting.
So would you vote?
No, I would not.
You will not vote?
No.
Why?
Because I don't want to.
You
And
don't
it's
want to
not
vote?
compulsory.
Yeah, it's not compulsory. You don't want to vote?
No.
Should I vote?
Yes, you should.
I should vote.
As a former chair of the NCC, I strongly urge you to vote.
But you won't vote?
It's a special privilege.
But you won't vote?
No, I won't.
Who should I vote for?
Oh, that is entirely up to you, but I would say that do not vote based on issues and based on where you want to see this country go and who you think can take this country to where you want this country to go.
That's interesting. Have you voted before?
Yes, I have.
But you won't vote on this occasion?
No.
How does your husband take all of this? You're in the limelight, you're being bastardized, criticized, it might not end now, you know, all sorts of things, your children.
It's not just my husband, my family, my father, my siblings. Their primary concern is how I am. If I'm okay and I'm taking it well, then they're fine. As a family, we've always cared more about character than reputation. Character is what you are. Reputation is what people think, and that can change. But your character has to be consistent. Your values have to be consistent. And so we focus on that. And for them, for my family, so far as they know I'm doing right, and that I am living by our value system, then they're okay, because everything else would pass. If people don't know you, they would eventually know you. And you just maintain your integrity.
I see. And your husband?
He's super supportive. Super supportive.
Are you enjoying the job?
It's an interesting job. It's enjoyable. It's challenging, yes.
Do you know the two key candidates well? This is the last question. Do you know them well?
The two of them?
Yes, the two key candidates, President Mahama and Nana Akufo-Addo.
I think I've answered this question before. Nana I've known for years as a friend, as a senior lawyer, because I was a lawyer. President Mahama I did not know until I was appointed to the NCC in 2011, but I think I actually met him in 2012. So I have known him because of my work at the NCC from 2012. But Nana I have known personally as a friend and as a senior.
Are you
lawyer
nervous
who is
about meeting
advising.
both of them on the 30th of September?
Not at all.
They're coming to speak.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I see. We didn't get time to talk about IPAC. Quickly, what is it?
IPAC is the
Just a few minutes, we'll get off soon.
Inter-Party Advisory Committee. And it is really the forum where the Electoral Commission engages political parties. We get their input into whatever we're doing. We seek consensus. We started IPAC in April of 1993. It's a really great place, and the relationship with the political parties is not as stormy as people imagine. Even with me, we get along very well. We take very good decisions that are in the interest of the nation. And so the attacks you see in the media, it's the norm. That's how political parties relate with electoral commissions. It's not personal. But IPAC is where we're engaged, and we have a good relationship with them.
When is the next IPAC meeting?
We have it every month. And getting into the elections, from this last year we've had it every month. Getting into the elections, the frequency would up.
Thank you, madam. Good luck.
I will need to thank you.
Good luck on 7 December.
Thank you very much.
For the result, for the presidential elections, the total votes cast was 10,781,609. Out of those, we had rejected ballots of 166,248, which is 1.54%. We had total valid votes of 10,615,361. Our turnout was 68.62%. Now, for the candidates, Mr. Ivor Kobina Greenstreet of the CPP had 25,395 votes, being 0.24%. Mrs. Nana Konedu Ajiman Rawlings of the NDP had 16,878 votes, being 0.16%. Mr. John Dramani Mahama of the NDC had 4,713,277 votes, being 44.40%. Dr. Papa Kwesi Ndum of the PPP had 105,682 votes, being 1%. Mr. Nana Akufo-Addo of the New Patriotic Party had 5,716,026 votes, being 53.85%. Mr. Edward Mahama of the PNC had 22,214 votes, being 0.21%. And Mr. Jacob Osei, an independent candidate, had 15,889 votes, being 0.15%. On the basis of the foregoing figures, and by the power vested in me as the chairperson of the Electoral Commission and the returning officer for the presidential election, it is my duty and my privilege to declare Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo as the President-elect of the Republic of Ghana. Thank you, greater and stronger.
Hello, good people of Ghana. My name is Jacob Akwaando, the PRO of Ghana Service. I strongly believe that we should stop giving names to people infected with COVID-19. It could be you, it could be me. Let's stop the stigma. Thank you.
There is 1 million excitement in the air, and Sapper just tapped into the mood with his share of waste bin from the 1 million waste bin project.
1 million waste bin project?
It is a nationwide social intervention project aimed at helping improve the lives of people by correcting poor sanitation practices and improving solid waste collection service delivery in Ghana by providing 1 million radio frequency identity tagged free waste bins.
Radio frequency identity tagged waste bins? This will enable monitoring of how often the waste bins are emptied in real time. Wow!
From your homes, offices, schools, hospitals, right through to places of worship. Yeah, baby.
How and where do I sign on?
Our branded registration and distribution officials will come along with their ID cards to register and distribute waste bins to all households. Just provide them with your name, contact number, house number, and digital address. Once signed on, you'll be introduced to your zone's designated waste collection service provider who will collect your waste on agreed days of the week.
Wait, is it free?
Yes, of course. The waste bins are free. You would, however, be required to pay a token as a registration fee at the point of registration and a monthly subscription fee as communicated by your service provider. Payment for such services can be done through mobile cash payments, short code *887*87# or through all Ecobank branches and payment platforms nationwide.
Oh my God, this is already getting exciting.
Yes, bro. With the 1 million waste bin project, you would enjoy improved solid waste collection,
easy access to complaint services,
quick response to complaint, easy and convenient means of payment.
What am I waiting for?
What are you waiting for? Get ready to grab your free share of waste bins now.
Well, so you heard the facts and you now understand the history. Let's see what happens later this week, and let's keep our eye on the activities of the Electoral Commission. That was an interview with Charlotte Osei. Once again, she was very charitable to us to grant us a live interview in the studio. Facts are sacred, but they say comments are free. That's Good Evening Ghana for you tonight. Good night.